Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Wyant, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Applied Software. You're invited to join our MEP and construction innovation adventure with a mission to propel this great industry forward. We are recording again live right after day 2 of MEP Force, and I have most of my panel here. Jake Olson and Amy Peck are back with us, and James Simpson is en route to the Atlanta block party that's happening in person. It's very exciting.
He's going to make it for the party, but not the podcast. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right. He's coming for the party. You know, the guy knows how to plan it, I guess.
Yeah. Real people, beer, party, or another Zoom meeting. That was an easy decision for James.
That's right. We got the ditch on that, but we'll catch up with him later, I guess. So day 2 started off with Clay Smith's CEO of Evolve MEP's keynote address, really talking about embracing disruption was kind of the overarching theme. Dove into a couple different areas from there, but let's start with the embracing of disruption. How do you guys see construction and the trades embracing disruption?
Amy?
Who wants to start? Shall I start? Well, I think we touched a little bit on this yesterday, and I think a lot of what we're hearing, in all of the keynotes in general, and even the panels and the breakouts, is how do we? It's not just disruption, really. I think disruption probably has that kind of Silicon Valley, like slightly negative connotation to it, and really what it is just rethinking how we think about innovation. Right. And how, I think, that this particular talk kind of talking about what is a single source of truth and, how we get there. And I think we talked a little bit yesterday too about, some of the arcane systems that we're dealing with, right. In terms of, wiring together older systems. I think with newer software and this sort of, API culture enables a lot more of us being able to wire together new solutions. And, it's interesting. I've read a couple of interesting articles. One is talking all about how you need to move to newer software, have open source wherever possible, and leverage APIs. Others say if you're sitting on top of sort of an arcane ERP system, you can live with it for another decade or so, but you need to start in parallel thinking about how you're going to move over to a more modern system. And I think that makes everyone very, very tense. But I'd love to hear, Jake, kind of your opinion on, your specifically with your customers, how are they integrating new software?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the discussion about when we're talking about our software solution, the architecture that it's built on is something that's coming up more and more from contractors, which I love, because those are questions they should be asking. How is your software architected? What type of general model do you have? What's your service level agreement? Those are conversations that I think it's great that contractors are starting to think about, software as a tech stack, as scalability. And those of us who are built on kind of modern cloud stack will tell you how easy it is to scale our software, how easy it is to take advantage of new technologies that exist and plug them into our system. Makes it very scalable. Whereas if I've got a 10-year-old, installed software, or even, I hate to say it, even some of the cloud softwares from 10 years ago, they're pretty monolithic in their code base, which, if you think about how do I pick a software vendor that's going to come with me and not get disrupted themselves? How do me and my software partner not get disrupted? I think that is important. I'm impressed that contractors are looking more towards how are you architected, how scalable are you? What's your release cycle? That's another good one. How fast can you push out features, your team? For me, those are ways to not get disrupted. And the fact that we're at least starting to have those conversations, I think it's never too early to think about getting disrupted, but I'm pleased to see the industry starting to have that awareness that this disruption is real. Todd, I don't know if you were in that last class I was in, but the book you have to read if you haven't read it is Clayton Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma. And I mean, it's just the iconic, I think it's 20 years old now, but it just perfectly defines how stagnant what doesn't seem like a stagnant industry becomes one, and also becomes a laggard really quick as technology pushes into different businesses and areas.
Yeah, Jake, I think you bring up an interesting point that as a software provider yourself, how do you inject confidence in your clients and give them confidence that data isn't going to be disrupted, or that you guys are staying on top of that?
Yeah, it's not easy. I think there's architectural questions that should be asked. How is the software architected? How scalable is it? How well can we adapt to change? And you can kind of walk through kind of a technical evaluation of the software, where it's hosted, APIs, what data do you share in and share out? How do you work with other systems? I think those are good evaluation questions. But there's a whole lot of other questions. Is the business viable? Is there a future for the company? Is the business going to be here in 5 years? Those are very real questions I think contractors need to consider when looking at technology. And look at it, just because you're a big established software provider doesn't mean that you're any more defensible. I mean, you might be more at risk than a young startup who's built on the latest, greatest tech. So I think, you look at the BlackBerries or whatever else, and, pick your case study of, fall from grace. So that part, I think the industry has some education to do around it. Just because it's, whatever, a 20-year-old company with 1,000 customers and 100 million in revenue doesn't mean it's a safer bet 5 years from now than maybe a younger startup. And I think, like I said, there's education there, and I think people are waking up to asking the questions about architecture, about trajectory, development ability, and those are good. That's the interview that should be happening from, a contractor CTO or innovation lead.
Yep, Todd's getting a lot of
yeah.
traction there.
Well, James Simpson just came in here now, so
he's out. He missed his opportunity.
Oh, all right, now. Oh, so
He's
gets
here.
to be
Yes.
now he gets to be IRL.
he gets to crash some. Yeah,
I missed my window of opportunity to get over there.
let's see.
We're back.
Welcome to the party.
Yeah,
We were teasing that you ditched us.
welcome.
We're
No,
just
I
coming
would-
into the
would
the
never.
party.
We thought you were only coming for happy hour.
Yeah, well, that is a perk.
Well, while we're waiting to get you guys all get your sound organized, I really like the thing that you mentioned, Jake, about just kind of asking the right questions. And how are you architected? I think that those are and I think companies really need to kind of understand, these are the technologies we're using today. Are you able to communicate with X, Y, and Z that are part of this particular workflow? And I think with some of the clients that we work with, just on kind of overarching strategy, that's one of the first questions that they ask is what's the viability of this technology, whether it's a hardware or software. And we actually will go in and we'll pull a whole report on how much funding they've gotten, what we estimate their runway to be. If I happen to know the VC, I'll get the VC on the phone. We'll talk to if they have a venture arm, we'll say, look, do you guys invest in these types of companies? And if so, you have to think about whether you'd be prepared to invest in a company like this, further on, which could be beneficial for both of you, right? Because you could carve out a sort of a customized piece of the stack for yourself to give you that competitive edge, but then also ensure the survival of the company moving forward. So those are all really, really salient points that I think sometimes people really miss.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And I think, we've seen some great partnerships when it's kind of a mutually beneficial relationship in a lot of different ways. You're solving a real pain for the customer, you're solving a problem, hopefully making them more profitable. But if you can do that and both share in the rewards, whether you have customization, competitive advantage because you've invested or because you put the time in, or even just financial returns, it's not a crazy model. You see more and more contractors that are actually, using their inside knowledge to how technology is working in their business to basically have an inside seat on investing in these companies, which is, I think we'll see a lot more of that. We are certainly seeing that in our little corner of the woods.
It's great.
So one of the other kind of themes that came out of Clay's keynotes was the opening the lines of communications and really trying to get more foresight and knowledge around the materials and the labor part and leverage data better. Sorry, everybody, for the background noise. We are live in the in-person event. It's fantastic. You should
What are you
see
guys
all
in
the
the bathroom
motion
over
that's
there? What the
happening.
heck was that?
I'll just keep coming in closer to the microphone every 5 seconds. That's right.
Coming live from the third stall.
That's right. James, with Clay being the keynote today,
Yeah.
What's Evolve doing to help? I know that he was talking about foresight or Evolve materials rolling out and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, the general idea is, everything's funneled through BIM and for a lot of reasons, right? But there's obviously downstream workflows as well that there's always an opportunity to connect that and solve those pain points downstream by leveraging what's there in the BIM model, right? Or maybe not what's there in the BIM model and somehow linking that back there as well. So that's definitely a big focus. But one of the things that Clay Freeman spoke about was really that lighthouse partnership with any customer that's willing, right? And that's incredibly important just because, it shortens the feedback loop of ultimately giving the best product to the customer, right? Which is the most important thing for everybody involved. So I think that was one thing that I was kind of coming in and I was hearing is that when I first sat down was just about how integral that's really becoming in just software development is just the true partnerships versus just developing, hey, is this what you guys need? Getting that feedback early and often. So both of those things really.
Mm-hmm.
I think inquiring minds would like to know what the fish special is today, since you guys have an inside track.
It looks good.
It is in full prep mode. What you got cooking over there, Steve, right now?
Oh man, I have a tomato bagna sauce. It's gonna be amazing.
Nice. Could you guys hear that?
What was it?
I couldn't pronounce it if I wanted to. It's too sophisticated for me.
Oh, this is an inside scoop for the podcast. Here we go. Here's Steve
hi.
There you go.
our executive chef tonight.
Is that Amy?
What have you got going on over there? Because it
What's
sounds
cooking?
amazing. I can't
Oh my
smell
God,
it, but it sounds amazing.
It's gonna be so good. So I'm doing a pan-seared and roasted salmon. We have a Dijon, like a herb reduced Dijon cream sauce that's gonna go with it with a chini de pepe pasta, like little, like almost couscous, but like actually pasta, not the Moroccan style. So good.
Oh, nice.
It's gonna be served with roasted vegetables. We have some charred corn. It's gonna be just amazing.
Yay. Okay. I'm very excited. I should see. I should
Nice.
keep
You should
there.
be.
Take that,
Sounds
Knuckle
great.
Draggers barbecue in Austin and Denver.
That's like $150 meal.
That's right.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Nice. So on the siloed information and having all these kind of individual data lakes of different, vendor providers, but also homegrown Excel spreadsheets as well too. How do we find the root cause and pull that out by the roots to help foster that collaboration that you guys have been talking about?
Todd, I went to, I think my first AU Autodesk University was like 2011 or something like that. And I remember the keynote was about single source of truth and breaking down the silos and the, this is it. This is going to be our year, whatever that was, 2011. I love that we're still trying to solve the problem because that's good. It means it's worth solving.
Means we made a lot of progress in the last decade.
Yeah. It means that we're still trying to solve the problem.
I have this conversation a lot. I'm not sure we have made a lot of progress. I actually think in one way we're creating more data lakes and silos as more software enters the industry. And I know this is a little anti what you wanted me to say, but I get my own opinion on this, right? Is that?
No, you have to toe the party.
The toe the party line. Yeah.
That's right.
But
Solving problems left and right.
I actually think the problem's getting worse. And I think it's not necessarily, maybe it's not a problem we need to solve. We just need to figure out how to optimize around it. But there's a ton, compared to 2011 to now, there's so many more opportunities to create a data lake now, whether that's through scan data, through VR data, through Revit, BIM data, through just all the stacks of paper we deal with, that, in a lot of ways, it's getting harder to get a single source of truth. And, maybe the optimization is learning how to work in the ambiguity of multiple sources of truth and stop trying to build the one platform that rules them all, figure out how you kind of optimize in the fact that you're going to have multi silos on a project. So
Yeah.
I always think about that, and I listened. I loved, Clay talking about how do we merge Revit data and field data into one place, because it's not always, the BIM isn't always going to be accurate, and those are good conversations. But that's my reaction to trying to solve the source of truth, only because I've been hearing it for 10 years, and seems like we still have a lot of silos.
Well,
Yeah,
I think the key is intentionality now, that you have to really think it through on the front side of, I mean, we were talking about this yesterday. What is your plan? How are you going to do it? You can have silos of information that's not necessarily evil in and of itself,
Right.
but know that this is going to be your silo, and then have a plan for how are you going to access that information, because it lives somewhere else, and not just have it that one person knows that it lives somewhere else and nobody else has any access to it.
Right. Yeah. How do you embrace the fact that we're going to have silos and then optimize your business around it? And maybe there's a silo interoperability or something we need to have in some areas, but in other places, maybe not. I mean, maybe it's okay for point clouds to live in their own optimized server and not have to be in BIM 360 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I think we also, I would challenge the notion that we live in an age where there's, this is my son FaceTiming me, so we're just gonna have to wait on that.
Good timing. Bring him in.
I could literally just
Yeah,
bring
the
him
more
on
the
right
merrier.
now.
Come on. This is
He's so mortified. It's like, hey, you're live. Now you can't do it to him. He'd be very mad.
and we
He's
only
trying
do
to
that
set
to
up-
James. He comes in.
He's trying
Hey,
to
you're
set up
live.
an
Come on.
HTC Vive with a former client of mine, as I sent him because I couldn't go. She's in LA. But I would argue that we don't live in a time now where there is such a thing as a single source of truth. I would argue that the very nature of innovative companies now are ones that are able to kind of maintain their fluidity while still pushing forward and finding creative ways to wire together data when they need it in the context in which they need it. And so, that's where software really comes in. And it's also where AI and machine learning come in to help us kind of parse these massive data sets. And, we should be sending out queries kind of daily, as opposed to just assuming that something that we built a month ago, well, probably a little longer than that, but a year ago or 2 years ago is still going to be relevant today. Bueller.
Sorry, it took me a second to find that mute button.
That was so
I was trying to do it with my
impactful.
left hand, and turns out I'm not coordinate with my left hand at all. It's the reason why I'm a right hand. And I just lost my train of thought there, but this one's going great. I'm excited for this episode.
We're professionals.
That's right. So supply chain was another big theme coming out of Clay's talk with the launch of materials and everything. How do the trades and construction protect against the volatility that's happening right now with the chaoticness of supply chain?
For me, I've been in several pretty high level kind of trade group conversations in the last month. And it's funny how important this topic's become all of a sudden. And I think everything from inventory management to commodities, forecasting, to just pure ordering efficiency, I think has become, whether or not it was the pricing surges that escalated that, or the move to fabrication, or of course, construction boom, tighten schedules, and if you don't have material, you can't build, you can't bill. I think it is going to be, the next big mountain that a lot of, especially subcontractors, climb, and there'll obviously be great solutions that are brought in along the way. Your question was, how do you protect yourself against that? I think right now we have a very non-digital process. You go to most contractors and ask them what's in their shop right now today, and what is the cost of that material versus what they could buy it at today. How many people can answer that question? So, you got to really get into the, first in, first out, inventory costing, inventory management. And, that's a great place to arbitrage. If you've got a balance sheet of cash, and you've got a spot buy on copper for something like that. These are things that manufacturing engineers think about. I think as construction moves in that way, we're going to hear a lot more about those types of conversations, commodities futures and inventory management, cost of goods sold, thinking about that as a raw material going into your process. So I think this is a really long answer, but the step one is actually treating supply chain materials like a true manufacturing operation and putting a digital process in for inventory management and purchasing. And I think that'll be, again, I think that's a great opportunity for the industry to change the way we build.
Yeah, we see these trends coming too. So if you are in a position to sort of, react to changes in the market or other supply chain factors, but not everyone is able to do that, right? Not everyone's able to stockpile or pre-buy or even, have the resources to have that kind of information. So it's really kind of, living with whatever your current capability is, trying to expand it and trying to get in front of the problem, but, paying attention to some of the clear market factors that we've been facing is one way to shore that up. But there's no magic bullet.
No, unless you digitize it, you can't even start to answer those questions. And then once you do, you still are at the whims of, market pressures that are really hard to forecast. But I mean, there's got to be a better solution than like one Fastenal truck driving to the job site with like 3 sticks of conduit on it every day, or half a pallet of fittings or something. The whole truck is going there with one little pallet on it. And how often are we on job sites where that truck shows up every single day? And whatever the price is that day is what they're paying for those, fittings. Like this will, I think, significantly change in the next decade.
Yeah, definitely. James, I know you're on the mechanical side of things and not so on the evolved materials side, but for the podcast audience, what is evolved materials? How are they coming at it for the supply chain? And maybe talk some of 5.0 relates to.
Yeah, so for materials specifically, it's really about pretty much what we're talking about, right? How do you centralize that information that about your material, whether it's purchasing, how often you're ordering, what are my lead times on certain things, and when you're funneling all of that through an actual kind of dedicated solution, you're able to pull those analytics out in the back end and then use that as kind of a leverage point to your suppliers, right? Hey, supplier A, your average lead time on this part last year was X, right? And supplier B says they have no lead time on that part for some reason, and be able to really utilize that to just at least broach those conversations with those same suppliers and ultimately gain a lot of efficiency internally, right? Knowing what's on, or if that thing's on site yet, your field can track that and know when it's going to be there. More efficient ordering kind of from downstream back up. There's a lot of internal efficiency. But what I'm most excited about really is how to kind of really empower contractors to leverage that data to have those conversations with suppliers kind of on the front end. But as far as for mechanical and electrical 5.0, I won't touch too much on it just because honestly, I could probably talk forever about it. It was definitely a labor of love, but tons of stuff in there, and really mainly about the package or the prefabbing workflow more than anything. Tons of improvements around whether it's kind of flexibility for your hangers, multi-tiers, spooling workflows, packaging in general. I could just rattle off a whole list, right? But it's really just about, once again, driving that efficiency for prefabbing workflows. And then my honest personal favorite, just customization, right? Because not only contracting is also one of those things where every contractor is at least minutely different, right? It's never 100% the same. From even it could be within the same sister company, right? And everything's just slightly different. So customization is the key. And so that was a big focus of 5.0 as well. So 2 things I'm definitely very happy about to kind of see come to fruition.
All right, I stand corrected. There is a magic bullet and it's called evolve.
Nice. That's how you get invited.
Your check is in the mail, Amy.
Venmo, I take Venmo. I'm good.
Yep. James, I in a former life did a lot of non-structural support design and anchorage design, and I was really impressed with the point load work you guys have been. I mean, there's never ending amount of work you could do there, but Is that a little, I'd love for you to just comment on that a little bit, how it came to be and kind of the value or is that, I assume, a feature your customers have been looking for? And then, where does it go from there? Do you seismic and?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the point loads in general was one of those, and this is in a way it's funny, but I really love this and this example because it speaks to what really listening to your customers get you, right? And it was, we assumed on the front end that point loads needed to be just that, right? To the detail level of a structural engineer, because what's the point in doing it if it's not 100% accurate, right? So we were really focused a ton of time and ultimately just never were able to fully execute on giving that feature to customers because trying to get those things accurate. And the overwhelming feedback we kept receiving, the more we asked for it was, listen, I just need something basic. I just need to be able to put something there so I can tell the structural engineer I did a good faith effort and ultimately at least just have some kind of data there to fulfill my own requirements. And so that's what we really executed on at least this first round, just a basic implementation to at least give them that ability that they wanted that basic ability, and then iterate, of course, is needed, right? But just kind of an example of being agile. And so that was one that I'm excited about. But then, yeah, long-term, tons of possibilities there. We've talked a lot about different seismic options, obviously starting off basic, once again, and iterating. But yeah, a lot of long-term possibilities building off that, definitely.
Yeah, cool feature for sure. I was very impressed watching that part.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So in kind of final wrap up, Jake, you brought up the optimizing your tech stack with the Construction Dorks roundtable at the end of the day. Any other kind of takeaways from that roundtable?
Yeah, it was a good one. I think, they got into, I guess, going back to evaluating kind of the architecture and looking at how software systems fit together as an important part. One of the sidebar conversations I thought was great on that was lean on your software vendors. And I'm speaking as a software vendor, lean on your software vendors to tell you how you're doing in rolling out a platform. So, we on the software side, I mean, I know usage statistics, how's it going? Are they, discovering new features? Is it being implemented in a way that I'm happy with as a software supplier? But very rarely do we, does the customer want to see that data? And, I think there's a lot of opportunity for benchmarking. And I can say, hey, look, contractor, this is the percent of the features you're using or the amount of usage. But for a contractor in this space, this is actually what we'd expect over here. Or you're crushing it. Like this is, you have a full implementation. It's going great. You should be very happy. But that was, I thought, a really good conversation. I think it had a lot of interest from the audience. Just how do you leverage we as software providers, we have metrics that we want to see to know that it's a good rollout, a good implementation, it's going well. How does a contractor benefit from those same metrics? And why aren't we taking advantage of that? So that was a great pivot. And I think that part of the conversations, if everybody has a chance to go back and listen to it, was a very good one.
Well, people can. All those sessions are on demand. Shameless
We have
plug,
this particular
MEPforce.com,
technology.
and you can get access to everything. And for those who haven't registered yet, it's not too late for you too.
Not too late.
Registration's still open. Awesome.
I mean,
Any other? Oh, sorry, go
Construction
ahead.
Dorks is the best name ever. I don't know who came up with that, but that is an absolute win.
Yeah, the best part is before you start going live with the Construction Dorks and hearing the conversation that they have, like in the virtual green room of what they're talking about. You never know what's going to come out of any of their mouths.
This is very true.
Yeah.
I find that on podcasts too, that by the end, when you stop recording, you get some of the best conversations out. And by the way, everything that we talk about when we're done here today is gold. So I'm sorry that you're going to miss all that, because we become amazing as soon as the recording stops, even better than now.
That's right. That's right. It's hard to believe. Any other final thoughts on day 2 so far?
I just want to get there for the salmon.
Yeah, well, you should. Sorry, Jake,
it's starting,
miss out.
it's starting to really come together. I can smell it.
I've also been told, Jake, from Emily, to mention all the data feedback forms for those that are attending MEP Force. Submit your feedback. Data, you guys have been awesome in supplying all of our feedback forms. We want to hear from people from MEP Force. So if you haven't gone in, rate and review the break. I was about to say the podcast because that's second nature to me, but rate and
Email those to
review
Con directly.
the breakouts from MEP Force.
Absolutely. Super easy to do. Everybody's got access to data. Go in and complete a feedback form. And Todd, I'm sure that's important for you guys to make this conference better and better every year.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much. Looking forward to capping it all off tomorrow with our final panel.
Yeah, definitely.
Great.
Glad you could join us.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Nice work, James. We thought about waiting for you, and then Todd's like, "Nah, I know what he's
Yeah,
saying."
no.
Well, I'm headed over there shortly, so I'll see you soon.
Enjoy the party,
Perfect.
guys.